You know, when most people think about selling a business, they picture a handshake. Two people, a buyer and a seller, sitting across a table, maybe a lawyer or two, signing papers. It feels personal. It feels like a transaction between humans.
That's the movie version. But in reality, there's an invisible third person sitting at that table. And usually, they're the one holding the biggest bag of money.
Usually a lender, which specifically often includes the SBA.
Exactly. The Small Business Administration. And here's the kicker. You can find the perfect buyer, someone who loves your business, loves your team, and agrees on the price. But if the bank hates the deal and a seller does not want to make the same bet on seller financing, oftentimes the deal is dead. It doesn't happen.
That's terrifying. It's like getting engaged and then finding out your partner's parents have veto power over the wedding.
That is a painfully accurate metaphor. And looking ahead to 2026, especially for sellers in markets like Ohio, the criteria for getting that parental approval is shifted. We're looking at a landscape where lenders are becoming much more selective. They aren't just looking at profit anymore, they're looking at deal structure.
So we're looking at this guide specifically for Ohio sellers, though honestly, this applies everywhere, about the 5 moves to make lenders fall in love with your deal. And I want to start with the one that feels the most counterintuitive to every business owner I know. Taxes.
Ah, the classic conflict. Every business owner spends their entire career trying to pay as little tax as possible. They write off the car, the dinners, the strategic planning retreat in Cancun.
Right. It's a business expense.
And that's smart for tax season. But when you go to sell, it's a disaster. This is move number one. You have to clean up the books, and you have to do it way before you list, because the bank looks at your tax returns and says, oh, you only made $50,000 last year. We can't lend on that.
But the seller says, no, no, look, I actually made $200,000, but I wrote everything off.
And the bank says, prove it. This is where the concept of recasting comes in. But here is the nuance. For 2026, lenders are getting stricter on what they accept as an add back. You used to be able to get away with some gray area personal expenses. Now, if you can't document it with a paper trail that would survive an audit, the bank isn't going to count it as cash flow.
So the strategy is essentially stop being clever with your taxes 2 years before you sell.
Precisely. You have to decide, do you want to save $20,000 in taxes today? Or do you want to sell your business for $500,000 more later? Because business valuation is a multiple of that profit. If you hide the profit, you hide the value. You are literally robbing your future self.
That's a painful pill to swallow. Okay, let's move to the second move because this one hits the ego. It's about seller notes. Basically, the seller lending money to the buyer.
This is the one that makes sellers angry. They say, I'm selling the business to get out. Why do I have to leave money in?
It does feel unfair. Give me my check. I'm retiring to Florida.
Here's the reality of the 2026 lending climate. Interest rates are higher than they were a few years ago. That on the bank needs a cushion. The bank needs a cushion. When a seller agrees to carry, say, 10% or 15% of the purchase price as a note, it signals confidence.
It's skin in the game.
Exactly. If you, the person who built the business, aren't willing to bet 10% that it will survive the transition, why should the bank bet 75%? A seller note is often a bridge that fixes the equity gap. Without it, the buyer might not have enough down payment or the debt service ratios don't work.
So it's not just a nice to have. In this market, it's basically a requirement to get the deal funded.
In many cases, yes. And frankly, it earns the seller interest. It's not dead money. But psychologically, it shifts the dynamic. It tells the lender, I built a machine that works, and I'm willing to wait for the last chunk of my money because I know it works.
Speaking of machines that work, that leads us right into the third move, the hit by a bus test.
Or the key man risk. This is huge.
I see this all the time. The owner is the business. They know the clients by name. They hold the secret recipe. They fix the server when it crashes.
And that is a deal killer. Lenders are terrified of helicopter owners. If you are the only reason revenue comes in the door, you aren't selling a business, you're selling a job. And you can't sell a job because the buyer isn't you.
So how do you fix that before 2026?
You have to fire yourself. Slowly. You need to document processes. You need a second in command who can run the day-to-day. The lender wants to see that if you disappear tomorrow, the check's still clear next month. If your name is on every relationship, the bank assumes those relationships leave when you do.
It's an ego death. You have to admit, the business doesn't need you.
It's the most profitable ego death you'll ever experience. A business that runs without the owner is worth significantly more than one that relies on them. It's the difference between an asset and a hustle.
I love that. The most profitable ego death. Okay, let's get technical for a second. We hear this term BSCR thrown around, debt service coverage ratio. It sounds boring, but it seems to be the holy grail for lenders.
It is the math that rules the world. In simple terms, does the business generate enough cash to pay the new loan, pay the buyer a reasonable salary, and still have a safety buffer?
And the buffer is the key part, right?
Right. The SBA usually looks for a ratio of 1.15 to 1.25. That means for every dollar of debt, there's $1.25 of cash flow. Here is where sellers get tripped up. They price their business based on what they think it's worth or what their neighbor sold for. But if the price drives the loan payment so high that the DCS score drops below 1.15, the bank cannot approve the loan. It's illegal for them, essentially.
So the price cap isn't determined by the market hype. It's determined by the cash flow's ability to service the debt.
Bingo. You can ask for $5 million all day long. But if the cash flow only supports a $3 million loan, you're never getting $5 million unless you find a buyer with a suitcase full of cash, which, spoiler alert, doesn't happen in the small business world.
It's a reality check. You're arguing with a calculator, and the calculator always wins.
And that brings us to the final move, which is really about timing and preparation. We call it pre-vetting or pre-qualifying the business.
This is doing the lender's homework for them, right?
It's aggressive, and it works. Instead of waiting for a buyer to find a bank, the seller goes to an SBA lender now and says, here are my books, here's my structure, underwrite me.
Wait, so you get the business pre-approved for a loan before you even have a buyer?
Yes, imagine the power of that. You aren't just selling a company, you're selling a finance company. You can put in the listing, lender pre-qualified with $50,000 down. That opens up the buyer pool massively.
It turns a maybe into a yes.
It removes the friction. It tells buyers, the money is already waiting for you, you just need to qualify. It also flushes out all those issues we talked about, the add backs, the valuation gaps, before you have a buyer on the hook. You fix the skeletons in the closet before you open the open house.
That seems incredibly strategic for 2026. If the market is tighter, being the easy deal makes you the winner.
Friction kills deals. Time kills deals. If you pre-vet, you reduce friction and time. It's that simple.
You know, listening to this, I'm realizing something. We usually think of selling a business as a battle between buyer and seller, but it's really a collaborative performance to impress the bank.
That is the perfect way to frame it. The buyer and seller are actually on the same team. They both want the deal to close. The seller wants the exit. The buyer wants the entrance. The bank is the gatekeeper. If you as a seller don't prepare your application to the gatekeeper by cleaning your books, stepping back from operations, and structuring the note, you're just wasting everyone's time.
And doing this takes time. You can't wake up in December 2025 and decide to fix your 2024 tax returns.
No, that ship has sailed. If you want to sell in 2026, you are essentially auditioning right now. Every decision you make today, hiring that manager, documenting the process, declaring that income, is building the case for your exit.
It's interesting. It forces you to run a better business today, even if you don't sell.
That's the irony. The things that make a business sellable, clean financials, strong management, good cash flow, are the exact same things that make it a joy to own. So even if you change your mind and keep it, you win.
That's a great place to leave it. It's not just about the exit, it's about building something that stands on its own. Whether you hand the keys to a buyer or keep them in your pocket, you're building an asset, not just a job.
Absolutely. The bank loves it, the buyer loves it, and frankly, you'll love it more too.
If you're listening and thinking about that 2026 timeline, stop looking at the calendar and start looking at your P&L. The clock is already ticking. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.